I'm Taylor, 26, and for as long as I can remember, my own family treated me like an outsider under the very roof we shared. Every dinner was a stage for their ridicule, every glance a reminder that I was unwanted. But what they never saw coming was the day I turned their cruelty into my weapon. By the time the papers hit the table, the laughter they used to throw at me vanished, and the house they swore I didn't belong in was already mine. The chandelier above the dining table hummed faintly, its light spreading across polished silverware and porcelain plates. The table was set with precision, but the mood was jagged, cutting deeper than any knife resting near the roast in the center. I sat at the end, hands folded neatly in my lap, while the rest of them filled the seats with easy laughter and smug remarks, as if my presence were nothing more than a flaw in the perfect symmetry of their evening. It began the same way it always did. A sideways glance from my mother, her lips curling into that familiar half-smile that wasn't warmth, only mockery. My father followed, his tone laced with deliberate cruelty as he set his fork down and said, "No one likes you in this house. You don't belong here." The words didn't sting anymore. They had lost their sharpness long ago, dulled from being thrown at me for years. What still lingered wasn't pain but the cold, quiet acknowledgement that this family would never see me as one of them. My siblings, seated comfortably beside each other, smirked and broke into laughter, the sound filling the dining room like an audience reacting to a well-rehearsed punchline. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I simply looked around at their faces. My mother's satisfied expression, my father's smirk, my brother and sister's smug delight, and something inside me steadied. They thought this moment was theirs, another reminder of my supposed place at the bottom of the hierarchy they had built around bloodlines and favoritism. Instead, I reached down to the leather bag resting against my chair. The motion was quiet, unremarkable, but it caught their eyes nonetheless. I pulled out a folder, crisp and clean, the seal on the front unmistakable. I set it on the table with a soft thud, the sound cutting into their laughter like a stone thrown into still water. The room didn't go silent right away. Their chuckles staggered, stumbled, and then trailed off, one by one. My father's brow furrowed. My mother's smile froze, just slightly. My siblings leaned forward, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. I let the silence linger. Then I smiled, not wide, not triumphant, but calm, measured. "Good," I said, my voice steady. "Because starting tomorrow, this house belongs to me." The color drained from my father's face. My mother blinked, almost as if she hadn't heard me correctly. My brother's hand slipped against his glass, the clatter loud in the quiet. My sister's mouth opened, but no words came out. The folder lay open before them now, the papers spread neatly across the polished wood. The deed transfer, the signatures, the notarized stamp. Every detail clear, undeniable. It was no bluff, no performance. It was final. For years, they had repeated the same narrative, the unwanted child, the outsider, the one who would never inherit anything more than ridicule. But the reality in front of them shifted in an instant. The roof over their heads, the walls they had claimed as theirs, the table at which they laughed at me, all of it now belonged to me alone. My father cleared his throat, his voice tight. "What is this supposed to mean?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I leaned back slightly, folding my hands. "It means exactly what you see. This house is no longer yours. It's mine." My mother's hands trembled against her napkin, though she tried to disguise it by folding it carefully on her lap. My brother pushed his chair back, muttering, trying to catch my father's eye. My sister shook her head, whispering something under her breath that no one acknowledged. They had always believed control was theirs, that I was powerless. Tonight shattered that illusion. I remembered every night I ate in silence, while they filled the air with condescension. Every birthday where my presence was an afterthought, a seat at the farthest corner. Every word sharpened against me, meant to remind me I was unwanted. And now, without raising my voice or lifting a hand, I had rewritten the ending. The papers spoke louder than I ever could. The dining room was suffocatingly quiet, filled only with the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. My father stared at the documents, as though willing them to disappear. My mother's lips parted, but no words followed. My siblings shifted uncomfortably, glancing between one another, searching for a cue on how to respond. No one moved to pick up their forks again. No one touched the food cooling on their plates. The meal had ended, though no one said so out loud. I sat there, steady, watching the disbelief harden into something else on their faces: confusion, panic, a flicker of fear. This house had always been their stage, a place where I was the unwanted extra in their performance. Tonight, with a few sheets of paper and the weight of truth, I had taken the stage from them completely. And as they sat frozen in their chairs, the thought pressed in on all of them with a force they couldn't laugh away. The silence from that night did not end at the table. It followed every one of them into the hallways, through the rooms, and into the shadows of the house they once thought was untouchable. The next morning was colder than usual, though not because of the weather. It was the weight of what had shifted. When I walked into the kitchen, I found my mother standing by the sink, staring out the window. The coffee pot was still, untouched, though she always started her day with it. She didn't greet me. She didn't even turn her head. My father sat at the table, the newspaper unopened, his hands gripping the edges as though if he let go, everything else would slip away too. I set my bag down, calm, the same way I had been the night before. My sister walked in, hair still unbrushed, eyes heavy. She froze when she saw me, as though I were some stranger trespassing in her safe space. My brother followed, whispering something to her, his tone sharp, before they both sat down without speaking to me. No one said good morning. No one asked me to sit. That was fine. Their silence was the acknowledgement I wanted. I opened the folder again, this time laying the copies on the counter. Today the transfer is official, I said, my tone flat. The bank confirmed it this morning. The deed is already registered under my name. From here on, nothing in this house moves without my approval. My mother finally turned her head. Her voice was low, controlled, but the cracks in it showed. How could you possibly? She trailed off, struggling with the words. My father cut in, his jaw tight. You think a piece of paper makes you the owner here? You have no idea what you're dealing with. I met his stare without blinking. I have every idea. I worked for this when none of you believed I could. While you dismissed me, I built my plan. And now it's done. Deny it all you want, but this house isn't yours anymore. The tension snapped through the air. My sister pushed her chair back, standing abruptly. You're pathetic, she hissed, though her voice shook. You think this makes you powerful? You think this changes anything? We'll never respect you. I didn't raise my voice. Respect isn't required. What matters is who holds the keys. I slid them across the table, the sound echoing. Every pair of eyes followed them, knowing what they meant. My brother leaned forward, his expression cold. You can't just throw us out. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? I asked, steady. You've reminded me for years that I don't belong here. Maybe it's time I let you feel what that actually means. The words landed harder than I expected. My father slammed his hand down on the table, the sharp crack breaking through the stillness. My mother flinched. My siblings froze. His anger wasn't new, but it carried something different this time, fear he couldn't hide. You're making a mistake, he said, each word pressed through his teeth. This family doesn't forgive betrayal. You'll regret this. I leaned forward, close enough that my voice cut directly into the space he tried to dominate. I already lived my regret. Every day under this roof, where I was treated as less. That's over. The only mistake was believing you could keep me small forever. The kitchen was suffocating, filled with stares that burned with disbelief and rage. My mother's hands shook against the counter. My sister refused to look at me. My brother muttered curses under his breath, too low for me to catch every word. The power had shifted, and they knew it. By midday, the reality set in deeper. My father tried calling lawyers. My mother tried speaking to old family friends. My siblings whispered behind closed doors, their voices sharp with panic. But each time, they hit the same wall. The documents were solid. The transfer was legal. Their name no longer tied to the house that once carried their pride. I watched them unravel in real time. Their laughter, the one weapon they always held over me, was gone. In its place were frantic whispers, slammed doors, and restless pacing. Later that night, my father confronted me again in the living room. The lights were dim, the atmosphere heavy. He stood tall, trying to reclaim his presence, but there was hesitation in his stance. "You don't understand what you've done," he said, his tone quieter than before, though no less sharp. "This house isn't just walls and bricks. It's legacy. It's reputation. You're tearing it apart." I sat on the armchair, unbothered. Legacy doesn't matter when the people inside use it as a weapon. Reputation doesn't protect anyone from the truth. What I did wasn't destruction, it was survival. His silence stretched too long. My mother appeared in the doorway, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She whispered, "Why now? After all this time?" I met her gaze, calm. Because now I had the chance. And because waiting any longer would have been surrender. The clock ticked loudly in the background, marking the end of a reign they thought eternal. That night, they didn't sleep. The house was alive with muffled voices and footsteps. I lay awake, not out of fear, but clarity. The second day after the announcement was worse for them. My sister refused to eat at the table if I was present. My brother stormed out of the house multiple times, only to return, slamming the doors behind him. My mother stayed quiet, withdrawn, as though speaking might shatter her completely. My father moved through the house like a shadow, no longer the dominant force he once was, but a man whose foundation had crumbled. The storm broke on the third night. Not outside. There was no thunder, no rain pounding against the glass, but inside the house, where walls strained under the weight of a family tearing itself apart. I had known it was coming. The restless pacing, the hushed arguments behind closed doors, the way my father's jaw clenched whenever I entered the room. They couldn't accept the truth, not fully. And so they began plotting, clinging to the one thing they thought they still had left, their ability to fight back. It began with my brother. He cornered me in the hallway just after dusk, his voice sharp, his breath heavy. "You don't deserve this. You tricked us somehow. Dad says there's a way to undo all of it." His fists were clenched, not raised yet, but tight enough to show the storm inside him. I looked him straight in the eye. "There's no undoing it. Everything I did was legal, binding, airtight. You can throw all the tantrums you want. It won't change who owns this house." His eyes burned, but behind the anger I saw something else. Fear. Not fear of me, but of the truth pressing down on him. He turned and stormed off, muttering that I'd regret it. Later, I found my parents in the living room. Papers spread across the coffee table. Old deeds, copies of wills, legal books that hadn't been opened in years. My father's voice carried the frustration of a man used to being obeyed, not cornered. "There has to be a way," he said, flipping through pages with shaking hands. My mother sat silently beside him, her expression unreadable, though her eyes betrayed exhaustion. "You won't find one," I said, stepping into the room. They froze. Every step I took was reviewed, every signature verified. "You think I'd walk into this without making sure there was no way back?" My father rose slowly, his face pale with rage. "This is not over." "It already is," I replied, steady. "The question now is how you plan to live in a house that doesn't belong to you." The silence stretched. My mother finally whispered, "Why are you doing this?" I turned to her, calm. "Because for years you reminded me I wasn't wanted here. You all laughed at my place in this family, as if I were nothing. Now, the one thing you valued most, the house you used as proof of your importance, is mine. That's why." Her shoulders sank, but she said nothing more. The breaking point came the next morning. I gathered them in the dining room, the same table where they once sat united in mockery. This time, I stood at the head. They took their seats slowly, warily, like people stepping into unfamiliar territory. I placed a small stack of envelopes on the table, sliding them toward each of them. My father's hands shook as he tore his open. Inside was a letter, direct and final, a notice to vacate within 30 days. The silence was absolute. My sister gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My brother shot to his feet, shouting that I couldn't do this. My mother's eyes brimmed with tears, though no sound escaped her lips. My father sat frozen, his face pale, staring at the words as though they had struck him physically. "I gave you what you never gave me," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos.
Time.
30 days to leave with dignity. After that, you're out. No exceptions. My brother slammed his fist against the table, but it only echoed his defeat. My sister whispered, "You're cruel." I leaned forward, my tone sharper now. Cruel? No, this is justice. Cruel was the laughter every night, the dismissal every day, the way you made sure I knew I didn't belong. You all built this moment with your own hands. I'm only delivering the result. No one responded. For the first time, they truly understood. There was no bargaining, no reversal, no escape. The house no longer belonged to them. The following weeks passed in a blur of bitterness. My father tried one last desperate call to an attorney, only to be told the same thing. It was over. My mother avoided me, drifting through the house like a ghost of her former self. My siblings clung to each other, whispering plans of where they would go, though neither dared look me in the eye. I stayed steady. I didn't celebrate. I didn't mock. I let them feel the weight of everything they had thrown at me now circling back. On the final day, I stood in the driveway as they loaded their belongings into the cars. The air was heavy, not with words, but with what they couldn't say.
My father refused to look at me.
My mother paused for one last glance at the house, tears streaking down her cheeks. My sister muttered something under her breath, venom without power. My brother slammed the trunk closed, his anger barely contained. When the engine started and the cars rolled away, the silence they left behind felt like a final chapter closing. I walked back inside, the echo of my footsteps the only sound. The house was mine, not just in name, not just on paper, but in truth. Every room that once held their laughter now belonged to me. Every corner where I once felt invisible now carried my presence. I stood in the dining room, looking at the table where it all began. The memory of that night lingered, their laughter, their words, their shock. And now, the silence was mine with unshakable truth. They told me no one liked me in this house. And now, none of them lived here at all.